economist, one of the best that I've ever seen in this space, who's in command of both orthodox economics as well as cryptocurrencies. Her name is Amani Moin. She's currently with the CFTC. But back then, she was working with us, and she represented what I would call the orthodox economics view. And her point was, look, for all these reasons that economists understand so well, you want an uncapped coin. You want to be able to leave the printing rate to governance, and you want to be able to print more coins on the fly as necessary. And there was an internal contingency within the company at the time, even though we were just about 6 or 7 people, with me and Kevin Seknicki, my COO, on the other side, saying, okay, what you're saying is exactly right for a sovereign nation. What you're saying is exactly the right thing to do for an economy that contains a full closed loop in it, for an economy that prints its own money, for an economy where people are paid salaries denominated in that money, for an economy that collects taxes, again, denominated in that currency. So science of economics is absolutely there to stay, and you can't just look the other way. But we have to understand the conditions under which that science was developed and the conditions for which that science applies. And in this case, when you have a cryptocurrency, and when you have our thesis that the world is going to be pretty much what it is today, that is, we're going to have many sovereigns with their own fiat currencies, and we're going to have a bunch of cryptocurrencies that augment the world as we know it, then the universe is very different. So from the get-go, this was actually one of the very biggest decision points. Avalanche decided that it's not trying to do what Bitcoin is trying to do. Bitcoin makes sense if you think that the entire world will be using Bitcoin and Bitcoin alone. So that makes sense if Bitcoin is competing with the US dollars of the world, with euros of the world, with golds of the world. We don't have that vision. We left that fight to Bitcoin. Bitcoin should be fighting it. It's a tough fight. It's going to face a lot of opposition. We know where we stand. We stand right behind. We would like crypto to be the prevailing paradigm. But crucially, the system we were building, our goal was not to compete with the dollars and the euros of the world. Our goal was not to compete or to tear down the existing system. Our goal is to augment it. Our goal is to digitize all of the world's assets. There's many trillions worth of assets that are not currently in blockchain form. Our goal is to digitize those and put them in blockchain form. So when you view it from that lens, then you really have to think hard about what it is that's going to give your system value. And scarcity is absolutely essential. So I agree with the Bitcoin thesis there, that you do need to have some kind of a scarcity and a hard cap to establish that scarcity. This was a bloody battle. This was a very intellectual battle, but it was very bloody, with Amani on one side, she's an incredibly strong researcher, and she knows how to draw a line and hold it, with Kevin Seknicki and myself on the other side. And just by a long war of attrition, I think we wore Amani down, or I don't know what happened, but in the end, we decided just by weight of having slightly more people on our side than her side, we ended up with the hard cap in Avalanche. I still think that, I think the events have borne out that decision. The key thing that we can see now, and I just heard somebody say this, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. When I was in LA recently, I heard somebody get on stage and say the following thing: the thesis that there will be only one coin has been thoroughly disproven. It's not coming from me, it's coming from other people that many of you probably follow on Twitter. That's an interesting thing to hear. And if you are designing for a multi-coin world, it's actually quite different than what you would be doing if you were trying to build a coin that is the sole coin for the entire universe to use for all time. So I think our vision was exactly right, that there will be multiple coins, that there will be assets issued on each. And the winning system is going to be the system that can accommodate the most amount of assets on its own blockchain. So that's what we set out to build. And so that's one of the main reasons why Avalanche has a hard cap. So it's not just Bitcoin. There are other coins that have this feature. It's a very useful feature, and it is a great source of value because it ensures that the future behavior of your coin is predictable and can be taken into calculations. And the fact that it's scarce makes it a valuable, hard to find thing. Now, second thing with Michael Saylor's tweet that's wrong is, look, there are countries out there where local folks, for whatever reason, may at some point or another decide not to hold their local currencies. The best example of this is not Turkey, of course. It's Lebanon right now. The Lebanese lira underwent a lot of devaluation recently. And over time, it was more, a little while ago, it was Venezuela. So it changes. When I was growing up, Turkish lira did suffer from hyperinflation. Argentinians know this all too well, and a bunch of other countries. The Italian lira, of course, suffered as well. So this is something that plagues just about every sovereign nation at some point in their history. The Germans know it from the 1920s. So if all you want is an escape from your own local currency to a dollar denomination, then any crypto will do. It's not just Bitcoin, even Doge. Doge is currently dead. Jackson Palmer, who's a fantastic person and somebody I happen to like very much, who came up with Doge, abandoned it a couple of years ago, essentially. I don't think there's been any progress on the coding front of Doge. And yet it still continues to trade, and its value is denominated to dollars. So if all you want is an escape to dollars, you could use Doge. It's just as good. So when people make these statements, they really have to kind of think and look down the line a tiny bit. There's a third issue, of course, with Bitcoin. And that's this. The way the Bitcoin protocol works is it constantly leaks value to outside parties. This is true for every proof of work coin. Namely, these outside parties are called power companies. So the security budget of Bitcoin goes in large part to exogenous providers of power. It goes to people who have control over whatever is being used, whether it's fossil fuel or flare gas or solar or whatever it might be. I hope it's more of the former, more of the latter than the former. That I hope we're not, we're certainly heating up the planet, but I hope we're not also pumping carbon dioxide into the air for mining these things. In contrast, proof of stake currencies don't have this feature. If you leave a proof of work currency alone, its price will forever do this. Why? Because constantly somebody has to go and pay an exogenous bill, an outside the system bill. Somebody has to go to the power company and say, hey, I have a connection this thick to my data center from your nuclear power plant, from your dam, whatever it might be, and so much electricity flowed through, and I had to sell so many of these coins to secure the system and then pay the power bill. We can talk maybe at a future date what this buys these proof of work currencies. It does buy them something. It buys them a cute little feature during the bootstrapping phase of these protocols. It turns out that what it buys there isn't sufficient to really move the needle because of things that technical discussion that I don't know that I should get into today in the very first conversation, but very happy to if people are interested. But bottom line, proof of work currencies have this exogenous cost and they're constantly paying that cost. Unless there are more flows coming into Bitcoin every given week, then the price will go down. This is one of the things that actually bugs me. Every now and then I sit around and people are thinking in a way that's indexed to proof of work currencies. Bitcoin and Ether are both proof of work currencies. They both have this terrible feature. So unless there's constant buy pressure, the price will go down because there's constant sell pressure. It has to be there to secure the protocol. So that's an issue. So if you leave these systems alone, they do this. And it's only because they're so popular. It's only because there's such a massive influx that the price ends up doing what it does, which is you don't actually see this constant pattern. When you look at it, it's not so obvious. It's only obvious in times of when money is scarce and it's not flowing into crypto, then you can see that there's a downward action. So proof of stake currencies don't have this feature. And again, at some other point, maybe we can go into detail on the security properties of these coins. But typically, proof of work coins are secured by mining hardware that costs about 1 to 2% of the full market cap of the coin. And proof of stake currencies are typically secured by capital, and that capital can be as high as 70 or 80% of the market cap of the coin. So they have an inherent advantage, both in terms of not creating sell pressure and also by being able to mobilize larger amounts of economic power to secure the chain. So that brings me to my fourth rant, micro rant. And I think people who listen to these series will figure out that, my internal process is driven by micro rants. It's, scientific filters and micro rants, I think is what it is. And the fourth micro rant has to do with the naming out and calling out Turkey. It's not just Turks who have to worry about inflation. Absolutely not. Someone who's living currently in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn, New York, am worried about inflation. Everybody should be worried about inflation. Perhaps, maybe not. I believe the Chinese economy is not suffering from many of the malaise that we see over here, at least from my vantage point. But from what I see, there is potential reasons to be deeply concerned about inflation. Why? Well, there is this CPI thing, Consumer Price Index. It's a highly manipulable metric. So the folks that do this, the central bankers that measure the CPI, have lots of levers available to them. All sorts of elements are in the CPI. Essentially, what they do is they take a consumer basket and they look at how much it costs and they track that. And you would think that this is easy. It would be easy if the basket had, tomatoes and bread and so forth in it, but it doesn't have certain things in it, and it also contains other things that are hard to price. For example, it contains a telephone, and the capabilities of a telephone changes over time. It contains computer equipment, and the capabilities change. So what was essential last year becomes archaic this year, or rather, what you get for the same buck, the bang you get for the buck from electronics devices especially goes up by quite a bit, and that really confuses the CPI calculations. There is a simple end-to-end test that anybody can run without having to resort to CPI, without having to trust the central bankers. And what is it? Well, just look outside and see how much labor you can get at a particular price point. Offer a certain salary and see how many people show up. It's easiest if you do this for unskilled labor. And if you look currently, at least in the US, at the low end of salary ranges, it's actually very difficult to find people willing to work for that pay. And this is very, very different from a year and a half ago. It doesn't take an enormous, genius to be able to see this. It's everywhere you look. So there's a shortage of workers at McDonald's. There's a shortage of all sorts of people. There's a shortage in New York City in taxi drivers and so on. And that's because the amount of money you can make for that salary is not sufficient to mobilize as many people as it used to. People are saying it's not worth it. And so that's a very interesting outcome. And it's a non-manipulable and end-to-end way to test if a particular amount of value is able to get you a particular level of labor. And I'm really concerned. So Turkey is a country that's been around a long, long time. Prior to Turkey, we had the Ottoman Empire. So this is a country that's been around for quite a while. So you want to be kind of careful in general. So this couple of words for people who are outside the Avalanche community. When you go in and say, hey, I see that you're suffering from some kind of a difficult situation, I would like to capitalize on it. That doesn't really go over well, Michael. And so that was not a tasteful thing to say. In general, again, Michael should be worried about his own situation in the US before he starts offering solutions that he benefits from to others. And my final micro rant on this is yeah, Bitcoin is fine. Why not? It's one of the many coins that's capped. That's cool. And doesn't do anything other than that, so that's fine. If you like it, go buy it. That's great. It's got a lot of liquidity, as I said. It's got a lot of brand recognition. So those are all wonderful. We all worked on getting it that brand recognition. But there's a bigger game in town, right? So as a sort of a professor who's like slowly getting older, or maybe on occasion I feel like I'm getting older quite fast. I worry about things that are happening that I might miss out on. And one of the things you should not be in life is be the kind of person who figures out just enough of something new and then shuts down. You don't want to be that guy or gal. It's just, learning new things is hard. I understand that. I know how much discipline and effort it takes me to figure out something brand new. It's not easy. And surely the user experience does not make it easy. The user experience of DeFi is abysmal right now. And that's something that I hope to address again in future discussions and also with code that we're putting out at Avalanche. But bottom line, if you just figure out just a tiny sliver of crypto and discover, oh, hey, this Bitcoin thing 11 years ago, it was very cool. I'm going to buy it. And now I'm going to shut my mind to everything that comes after it. And I think you're doing yourself a huge disservice. You've already taken the first step. You already dipped your toe in the water. You saw how amazing these assets are. They're so fluid. You can send them across the globe in an instant, at least Avalanche you can. Bitcoin you send in an hour, which is still pretty darn fast compared to how long my bank takes. And these things are functional. Avalanche can do everything Ethereum can do. It can support smart contracts and so on. And on top of that framework, one can build really exciting financial applications. And these things compete and often far out compete what your bank, or my bank at least, is offering. So don't be the kind of person who shuts down. Don't be a maximalist for any coin. I myself am not an Avalanche maximalist. If somebody comes up with something that's better than Avalanche, I have to, just by virtue of who I am, have to call it out and say that thing is an advance on us. So I suggest you do the same, and I suggest you shy away from maximalism in all its forms. Everybody who has been a maxi has been proven wrong. And I was saying this 5-6 years ago, and I faced a lot of opposition from maximalism, and I think it's just been borne out. So that sort of summarizes what I think about my reaction to Michael Saylor's tweet. Generally, you don't want to be a vulture that jumps into a situation and tries to profit off of it. And generally, when you do offer a solution, you should offer a comprehensive range of solutions and have some scientific backing for it. The solution he offers is fine. It's a hard capped asset, but there are many others like it, and you should probably do your research and take a look at all these other ones that not only are hard capped, but also support many additional features and all sorts of exciting functionality, such as DeFi. So that was my quick rant. So when I started doing this series, I thought, okay, what's top of mind? Well, that's top of mind. I was pissed off at what got said. There's other stuff that's been on my mind. I spent 2 days this week, Monday and Tuesday, in Los Angeles. There was an event called the Medici event, and it was held in conjunction with, or very close to, a big meeting called the Milken Institute meeting. And it was really interesting. The Milken Institute thing attracts a sort of a different crowd, the movers and shakers, or the mover and shaker wannabes. I'm not sure which one. But in any case, it was a who's who kind of an episode. The Medici event was fantastic. It was a very high quality event that brought in a fair number of fund managers, both from traditional finance and from crypto. So I had never met that many billionaires in the same room, nor had I met that many people who control trillion-dollar funds. And it's really interesting when you talk to them. And there are a couple of things that I can tell you right now from my initial experience. So take this as sort of an insider's view or something, or a view from the inside from somebody who was essentially just me. So these funds, they're really excited. They really have FOMO. There are very few yield opportunities anywhere on the globe, and they're looking for the next new big thing. Many of them realize that what's happening here is essentially a parallel of what happened in the internet space. And what happened in the internet space was, as you well know, a huge boom. Of course, every cycle, every boom involves all sorts of froth. There is so much froth in this space. There are 8,000 coins. I don't think, I think 99% are probably trash. But there are some gems in there. Just like there were, there were more than 8,000 .coms in the 1990s, and some persevered. Amazon today is huge, right? So it's an interesting situation with some parallels, and the folks I spoke to certainly get this. The other thing that I noticed, which is really interesting, is that the bigger the fund, the less likely it is that it's able to even hold coins. And the managers for these funds are dying with FOMO, at least in my experience or in my conversations. They are really, really excited, and they are currently in the process of trying to change their agreements with their LPs such that they can actually hold coins directly. If you can't hold coins, you can't partake. And if you can't partake, then you watch as other people are making huge returns, and you're unable. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that by any stretch or means that these conditions will persist forever. In fact, everybody realizes that this is a temporary situation. Once actual liquidity comes in from traditional finance, the world's going to be different. The yields that we see in DeFi will go down substantially, and everything will equalize as they tend to, just by virtue of really efficient markets. So, but there is a great inefficiency, and the inefficiency stems from essentially a new disruptive technology not being accommodatable by the incumbents. And the incumbents are now currently scrambling to change their ways. There is a difference that I did not appreciate when I was a professor between different kinds of funds. I will come back to that in a little bit, but there are funds and there are funds. There are VC funds, there are hedge funds, there are pension funds, and so forth. And at this event, I got a chance to talk to quite a few of these, and they're very different. VC funds not only provide financing, but they also provide support. Hedge funds are just there to make money, and of course, pension funds are there to get the best possible return. They typically have far bigger pockets, and so I'm going to come back to this when I talk about predictions and so forth in my last topic for today, the thing that's been on my mind. But you should be aware of this as well, because on Twitter or crypto Twitter, crypto circles, etc., these all blend into one, and they're not all the same. They do something entirely different behind the scenes. And at the moment, the pension funds are not in crypto, at least not the ones I can see. And at the moment, I see very, very clearly that certainly based on their jurisdiction, so there's not all these funds are also the same. So some of them are Canadian, some of them are American, some of them are from other countries. So they are all governed by different rules and different LP agreements and so forth. Depending on their circumstances, they are somewhere in the process of opening up to be able to hold coins directly, to be able to hold crypto directly. But I have not yet met one that is currently holding anything. That's really interesting, because it tells me that when that source of capital comes in, then we're going to see a leveling up potentially of valuations. So it was really fun to be there. It was really fun to talk to these folks, and I had this one convo with this one gentleman who said, I said, are you holding any Avax? And he said, no, I cannot. And you don't want me to be because it means that when I come in, things will change. And it was really interesting and really, really fun. So So that was kind of a fun discussion to be had. So let's see what other things were on my mind. I spent quite a lot of time this week during the night. Well, okay, I spent 2 nights as I went to sleep thinking about my predictions. So, I got into science. I got into being a professor. I got into computer science because scientists are kind of like magicians. They can look into the future. They can predict things, and that has tremendous value, right? And imagine what we were doing before we had science. We couldn't really predict, right? When you think the earth is balanced on a bull's horns or on top of turtles or whatnot, you can't really tell when earthquakes are going to happen. We still can't that well, but we're trying to sort of get there. But there are a bunch of places where science actually gives us very, very good tools for looking into the future. And I take the word professor. I always took the word professor quite seriously and somewhat literally. To profess means to hold a public opinion. There are many professors who are just milquetoast people. They just go with the flow. They try to latch onto industrial trends. They see something happening and they just want to tie their horse to it. And I always thought, no, this is not the way to do this. The right way to do this is you have your own horse. You pull the sled in the direction you want it to go. Or you call out what will happen. And if you're good, it happens. So I've always done this, and I judge myself by how well I do it, and I'm really proud of my performance recently. So I spent a little bit of time again looking back, and just recently a bunch of things happened. So about a year ago, we predicted that there would be a giant bull market in crypto a year and a little bit ago. So you have seen all sorts of people go out there and proselytize about crypto, etc., etc. Many of them have deep pockets. Even as they were tweeting publicly or saying publicly that crypto is going to go to the moon, etc., they were not actually willing to put their money behind their words. So it was really, really interesting. That was a very strange time. 2020, early spring, the money had dried up for crypto. Bitcoin was trading at, I don't know, I think 6,000 or so maybe. And so people did not, they said, obviously in public, they say it's going to become $1 million, etc. But then you say, okay, well then why don't you buy some? And they're like, well, not right now. That was really odd. We knew that great things were going to happen. And I believe, and I'll make this statement, it might be controversial, it might be wrong. If it is, I'm happy to get it corrected. But I believe that the very first sign of the bull market of 2020 was the Avalanche public sale and the insane interest that it garnered. It ushered in the bull market almost exactly on cue. It happened in mid-July, and the system went live shortly thereafter, and we started to see a very nice bull market. And what happened afterwards? I called out, I think publicly again, a BTC price target of $40,000 to $60,000. It happened exactly on cue. And okay, maybe I was a little short. It went to, I think, 65-ish or so, 66. And that's fantastic. I also said that the bull market would come to an end in June. That also happened almost exactly on cue. And then I said, the bear market's going to be short-lived. That also happened. Again, all of those same people who are so super whatever, gung-ho about this, that, and the other, they suddenly went into bear mode, and they lost their cool. They became really, really skittish. And I was like, no, this is going to take not too long. We're going to pick up from here, and there's going to be a big rally in October, November. So that rally is just happening even as we speak. Had I been wrong, I'm sure I would have been roasted by all sorts of people and nailed to the cross, etc. I think I kind of nailed it. So I'm pretty happy about what happened there. And and I just want to tell you how one can do this. It's very, very simple. There's it's again, like every magic trick. Once you know it, it's actually fairly straightforward. The thing that kind of gives me a slight bit of an advantage is the fact that I talk to traditional finance people. They come to people who they see as subject matter experts, and they ask, hey, I want to buy some, I want to go into coins, I want to go into cryptocurrencies. Could you, help me think through what the risk factors might be? Could you help me with custody solutions? Could you help me with this, that, and the other? Let's talk about smart contract risks. I want to go into DeFi. How do I go into DeFi, etc.? All these questions ends up, they have to be fielded by somebody. And so I ended up, at least in the past, talking to quite a few entities considering going into this area. And that was my crystal ball. I knew when people were getting in, and that allowed me to predict what's happening. And that's why I think this discussion in LA was really so much fun, because there is a lot of people out there who have a big interest in exploring crypto. So those are the three things that were on top of mind for me to at least this week. There's a lot of exciting things happening in Avalanche. So on the protocol level, there's a bunch of very low-level optimizations that we are working on. It's always fun, very geeky stuff. I'm not going to bore you with it. On the bridge level, there's a lot of exciting developments. As you might have seen, our bridge is one of the cheapest, easiest to use, and the way it operates, the bridge is essentially offline. The bridge has no public touch points. Again, one issue that's top of mind was that there was an SGX vulnerability, but it was unexploitable for us, not in our bridge. So it was patched immediately, and replaced the buggy SDK from Intel was replaced within I think a few hours of us being notified that there was a buggy SDK, and so I'm really proud of the architecture we built there. It gave us, I think, the world's most convenient to use, cheapest bridge for bringing assets over. We can go into this whole vision again, but if you do believe in a multi-chain universe, these bridges are going to be key. And I've been saying for some time that this year is going to be a year of bridge, the year of the war of bridges. So whoever has the best bridge technology will end up garnering the most amount of value. And also, as a word of caution, you got to be careful. There will be some cheap knockoff bridges that do not have the security features that you might see in, say, our bridge technology, where the bridge can get hacked. And that almost happened to, I think, OneCoin this week. So it's an interesting time. The next year will be full of bridge improvements, bridge hacks, bridge setbacks for a bunch of different coins. I am really proud of the tech we've built at Avalanche for bringing things over, bringing assets over. And on other fronts, there is ETH Lisbon happening sometime soon. I think it's happening tomorrow. And in conjunction with it, there's a house that we built there called Avalanche House. And if you are currently in Lisbon, do come by and say hello. I couldn't be there this year, but we have a sizable team from Avalanche hanging out in Lisbon. And there's all sorts of quiet places at the Avalanche House where you can talk. There are places where you can play games, places for wireless connectivity, etc. It's just a sort of a geeks hangout place that we created for people. And there are constant talks going on in case you want to find out about the latest, greatest protocols in DeFi. So thank you everyone for joining the first of this All Access series. I believe this is going to be a fun way to share information with the community, tell you a little bit about myself, my background, my values, how I think about things. And I think, I don't know what effect that's going to have. Oftentimes when people figure out, how someone works, their first reaction is to say, hey, I could do that. And that's exactly my goal. I would hope that I can convert some of you to becoming experts in distributed systems. I would love that above all else. There is really nothing special to becoming an expert. It's just a bunch of hard work and putting the time in and doing whatever needs to be done to be on top of this new emerging exciting technology. I have been traveling a lot lately. I really did enjoy sitting down and talking to everybody in this one-sided fashion, I guess. It's kind of odd, first for me, and it does feel a little weird, but it does allow me to touch upon things that somebody would not normally ask me about and to share with you what's on my mind. I'm hoping that this will be a good way to connect with you all and to talk about interesting topics. As I said, I promise to do my best at at essentially being genuine. So, I might make mistakes on occasion. I might say the wrong thing. This is a very hard medium to master, and it's very, very hard to touch upon a diverse set of topics, be comprehensive, be organized, etc., and get everything right. So if I make mistakes, do correct them. If you want me to discuss certain topics, feel free to tweet at me or DM me. My DMs are open. And otherwise, I'm going to go out and I'm about to make some food tonight. I'm going to go to my fisherman and buy some fish in a little bit, 10 minutes. So I hope you have a great weekend as well. It's a wonderful, warm day and a fantastic weekend in New York City. And I hope you enjoy your weekend as well. Hi, everyone. Hello and welcome. This is the first in a series of live discussions I'm going to be having on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Avalanche YouTube. The goal of these series is to share what's on my mind in the world of crypto at any one given time. I'm going to share my reactions to current news, stories about my work in crypto, stories about distributed systems, backstories that people don't get to see from their vantage point, background knowledge about the science and engineering behind blockchains, and generally a discussion around whatever is happening, the latest, greatest, coolest, or at least the most interesting things that are happening in the world of crypto and blockchains. I will occasionally be doing a deep dive into some of the product features of Avalanche. We will do some deep dives into various different topics that are not Avalanche, but are still within the crypto distributed ledger space. If you're here, you probably know a lot about Avalanche already. And if you're here, you probably know a little bit about all the standard things that people ask me. I've been asked a billion times how I got into crypto. You probably have heard a billion times the story of how I got in 2002 with the system called Karma, how I built a system that was using proof of work before Satoshi came along with Bitcoin. And so I'm not going to rehash that old stuff. And I'm not going to be touching upon the sort of the most central things that everybody always asks, like what's the value proposition of Avalanche, et cetera, et cetera. You've heard all of that stuff. This is going to be different. And I'm hoping it's going to be informative. I'm hoping it's going to be somewhat interesting. I'm hoping it'll expose you to the world from my vantage point. But above all, I'm hoping that it's going to be genuine. I'm hoping that everybody gets to see how I approach these problems. And there are many. The science of blockchains and the engineering of blockchains is far from established. We are still doing ongoing cutting edge research. And it often helps. Like I always wished I could shadow some of my mentors or some of the people I looked up to and and I always wished I could figure out how they view problems, how they approach issues. So I'll try to give you a glimpse. And I'm hoping that it'll be interesting, it'll be fun. And if you want me to cover any specific topics in subsequent weeks, send me your questions in the comments below or DM me on Twitter. But let's get started. So there are a couple of interesting issues to discuss this week. And I think the most pressing one, the big obvious one, is that Bitcoin is absolutely on a tear, price-wise. I generally don't talk about price in public of any coin. It's one of the least interesting things. But it is happening, and it captures everybody's interest. It captures the public interest as well, for good reason. And that interest in Bitcoin brought Michael Saylor out, and he tweeted about how Bitcoin is hope for Turkey. That's his quote. Bitcoin is hope for Turkey. So that got me a little fired up, and I think there are a couple of things that whenever any one of us hears such a thing, we should immediately put up our typical scientific questioning mind and immediately go into the regular thing that we always do. But anytime anybody makes a statement, which is check it through the filter of common sense and rationality. So let's do that to this statement, because otherwise, he's going to get probably 6,000 likes or more, and people will rally after it. But let's make sure that the statement is correct, meaningful, and in line with our values. This is typically how I approach anything that I see anywhere on the internet. So first of all, let's start with the technical things. Is he technically right? Okay. So the best kind of right is obviously technically right. Well, he's not technically right.